All right, as you already know, the Prime Minister was on a visit to Papua New Guinea. He arrived yesterday for the FIPIC summit. He's been there now. He's leaving on your screens, as you can see. He is going to be headed to Australia right after this. So it was a three-country visit. First, Japan, Papua New Guinea right after, and then Australia. Papua New Guinea is located actually right above Australia. It's a small island nation right above Australia. He was there for the FIPIC, which is essentially a consortium of a number of Pacific nations coming together. The goal of this meeting was to boost bilateral relations between the two countries. Remember, Papua New Guinea and a number of the other Pacific region countries have been facing a very, very hard time in the economic context over the last few months, with shipping issues and supply line issues causing issues to the economy and economies in the region. It's aid in that area that has been a focus during this meeting. Now, it's also important to point out that because Papua New Guinea has a significant Indian diaspora that is present there, the Indian diaspora has actually been part of the welcoming and the ceremonies that we saw play out yesterday. The Prime Minister was also conferred with a number of different awards from the participating nations in the FIPIC summit. But as we said already, he's now going to be headed over to Australia, where he'll be meeting the leader, Anthony Albanese, in just a little while from now. As we told you, this is a three-nation visit that the Prime Minister has embarked on. Japan, that we were focusing on a little while ago, it's in Japan that you'll remember the Prime Minister actually met the Ukrainian president for the first time since the Russian-Ukraine war actually started. That was a particularly important point of note. Now he's made his way, as you can see, to Papua New Guinea. You can see on your screens, he was actually greeted yesterday by the leader. And what's particularly significant is that Papua New Guinea doesn't usually roll out the red carpet or have a ceremonial greeting after sunset. They actually changed their traditions to welcome the Prime Minister. This was seen very much as a mark of how important this visit was to them. But that was a particularly interesting note. He was greeted first by the leader and then, of course, the governor in the region. Now, my colleague Siddhant is with us. Siddhant, I've given our audiences some context to this visit, but what we haven't touched on so far is the eagle-eye view, the larger diplomatic chessboard on which this meeting should also be looked at. There is, of course, the last few years where we've seen China increase its influence in the region. Is that the correct perspective in which to look at this visit at also?
Well, absolutely. That's the correct perspective. And in fact, adding on to what you just mentioned, under the Prime Minister Narendra Modi's leadership, India came up with an addition of Look East policy. And perhaps whatever is happening today, right now, in terms of holding summit with Pacific Islands, or perhaps visiting them, meeting their leaders, having bilateral talks with them, is a part of Look East policy of Modi government. And also, when countries like America, Germany, France say that there cannot be any Indo-Pacific without India, then when they make this a statement, then it talks about the responsibility that India is carrying on its shoulder right now in terms of safety and stability of Indo-Pacific. And perhaps India has also been endorsing the idea of free and open Indo-Pacific, whether it's Japan, whether it's Taiwan, whether it's Philippines, whether it's these Pacific island nations. They all are concerned about growing Chinese aggression in whole of Indo-Pacific, particularly in South China and East China Sea. And West is seeing India as one of the major players which can perhaps speak against Chinese dominance, aggression, or perhaps maybe counter if required in the near future. So and Modi government realized it immediately right at the time of forming government in 2014, and perhaps they came up with the Look East policy. And today, Prime Minister Modi participated in the third Pacific Islands summit. And in fact, he held bilateral talks. So it has more to do with the overall region, but also India has always been believing in soft power. So India is helping them as far as their developmental initiatives are concerned in solar, in climate change, helping them with setting up hospitals, dialysis units. India is right now not signing any sort of defense agreement or defense treaty with them, unlike US and China. So that perhaps gives more space for India to penetrate in this region, because they still feel that India is a reliable partner and ally. India is not only investing or perhaps helping them because of the strategic locations, but India, going by India's past also, India's history also, India is not a war-loving nation. India doesn't believe in aggression. So the growth of these nations can be driven by India, and this is what a belief that these nations have, and perhaps that was reflected yesterday at the time of the reception, emotional reception which Prime Minister Modi got, and today also he was accorded with the highest honors of these respective nations. So when it comes to China, it's about the defense agreements. When it comes to US, it's about the defense agreement. Maybe US can come up with new bases in Papua New Guinea and other islands, but with India is offering them hospitals. India is offering them dialysis units. India is offering them sea ambulances. So whatever India is doing in the framework of humanitarian assistance, and that makes a very special place for India, for these island nations. Back to you.
I also want to ask you, Siddhant, thank you for first highlighting the role that the US is playing, the role that China has hoped to play, and now, of course, the role India is playing. Now, one of the key things that countries like Papua New Guinea, but a number of the other Pacific islands have highlighted is their two primary issues. A, of course, climate change, and B, the difficulties that are being caused by supply chain disruptions. How can India help in either of these issues?
So India has been championing the cause of and concerns of these Pacific islands with regards to supply chain. And in fact, in G20 meeting, which took place in the month of March, foreign ministers meeting, the smooth supply chain was very much on the agenda. And even in the statement, also with joint statement which was issued, the framework for the smooth supply chain, food supply chain, was very much meant. And in fact, I would also like to draw attention of our viewers to the meeting which Prime Minister Modi had with President Zelensky, the bilateral meeting. There also, Prime Minister spoke about the concerns of the global South, and Prime Minister conveyed it to his Ukrainian counterpart that how, because of the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, the countries from the global South are suffering in terms of fuel supply, in terms of food supply. So India has campaigned the cause and the concerns of the countries from the global South, and this is the reason that they have. They trust India, and they also say that even when you speak to them off the record, they say that China does it to debt trap you. US does it because US wants military bases. The US wants to occupy your military bases. They want to send forces. But when India do it from the heart. India do it under the framework of humanitarian assistance, and this is what is being loved and respected by leaders all across Pacific.
Okay.
And that is perhaps getting good name for the India.
Okay, and Siddhant, the third question for you. You were talking right now of the defense deal that was signed between the United States and Papua New Guinea, and essentially what this is going to give Papua New Guinea is access to US state surveillance, for example. I just want to understand from you, Siddhant, you were telling us earlier that there were protests taking place in several universities. Essentially, it seems that students are concerned also because China is an important trade partner, and there's this fear that this deal with the United States might also affect that. How does India position itself in relation to this issue?
Well, U.S. was very loosely concerned for these nations, though they fall in the U.S. backyard. But U.S. was not very much concerned before the Chinese aggression in the Indo-Pacific. And recently, U.S. has started showing concerns. So, look, U.S. is coming up with the new military bases in Philippines. There is protest going on in Philippines also against the U.S. coming up with the two new bases. Then there is also a plan of U.S. military using the bases of Papua New Guinea, the military bases of Papua New Guinea. So there is a massive protest which is going on, and because people there are criticizing this move because they're calling it unconstitutional, and they're saying that it is a violation of the constitution constitution by entering in any sort of a defense agreement with U.S. which allows U.S. forces and perhaps give him certain kind of immunity, which allow them to ground their foot in the Papua New Guinea soil. So this is being heavily criticized because they feel that this could have a larger ramification.